Hey guys, welcome back to another video. Today with me I have a special guest, my first guest on my YouTube channel, my father, Aaron.
Hi guys.
Now my dad, I mentioned in my very first video, he was the person that really introduced me to horror movies. We would watch The Evil Dead when my mom wasn't around because she didn't want us watching it. So he always encouraged me to break the rules and watch whatever the hell I wanted to. But today we're going to be reviewing a movie that is dubbed the worst movie ever made, but is a cult classic and loved by a lot of people, Plan 9 from Outer Space. Plan 9 from Outer Space came out in 1959 and was directed, written, and produced by Ed Wood Jr.
Okay, for a quick synopsis of what happens in the movie, there's aliens that are from outer space and they come down to Earth to warn us about the future things that are going to happen in the future, which you will find out when you listen to the commentary at the beginning.
The commentary in the movie is kind of necessary because I don't think the movie would make as much sense without it. But the commentary that...
Yeah, because there's no dialogue.
There's no dialogue.
There's limited dialogue.
There's limited dialogue, and Ed Wood Jr. had written out a commentary for a particular part played by Criswell, who was a famous psychic back in the 50s. He had his own TV show where he would have people come on and tell them psychic things. So that's who
I can read your mind.
That's who the narrator is in the movie. But Criswell apparently read what Ed Wood Jr. had him, his script for him, and was like, I don't like this is boring. So Criswell wrote his own narrative for the movie, so every part that he reads was written by him. But basically Criswell's whole entire part was alluding to his own TV show, so I don't really know if he did this to benefit Wood Jr.'s movie or if he just did it for personal gain. But he was a popular face at the time, which probably did help the movie go along. That's actually the third big name, I guess you could say, in the movie, because...
But he was first.
He was the first person to show up. But there also are two horror movie icons from the 50s and 40s.
Bela Lugosi. Which is one of the most iconic horror people ever in black and white film. He played Dracula in every movie. He played Dracula. And
then Vampira, who her role in the movie is very much just a favor. She was only paid $200, which
only $200.
But I looked at during the time, I think that equates to a little under $5,000.
Yeah, but it only took 2 weeks to shoot.
True, the movie itself took 2 weeks to shoot, and the script wasn't finished while shooting. And
not only did it only take 2 weeks to shoot, she refused to speak in it because the dialogue was so crappy.
Yeah, Vampira read the script, said, I don't like this dialogue. I'll do the movie if my character is mute.
I'd get $200 to walk around like this.
With her giant nails. But yeah,
for 2 weeks.
She really didn't want to be part of the movie. From everything that I've read, she really just did it because she could, and she got $200. But they didn't even have a makeup place on set, so she would have to get herself in her full Vampira makeup at her apartment, and then ride the bus to the shooting location. And then she would do her scenes. And I think she only was there for a few days on set, and then she pieced out.
So not only did she get $200 for walking around like this and not saying anything, she only had to do it for a couple of days.
Yeah, the whole shooting was only 2-ish weeks. Most of the props were cardboard and styrofoam. The movie itself isn't the highest of quality. Ed Wood Jr. did say that it's still his prized possession. He's very, very proud of this movie. I don't know if it was supposed to have a high standard, but it doesn't meet that standard. It was. But the movie was funded by a Baptist church, and Wood Jr. went to that Baptist church and basically pitched the idea, and I don't know if they just felt bad and were like, we'll give you some money, but he ended up spending...
Well, no, here's what happened. He was like, guys, I'm going to make this movie, and I'm going to let you be in it.
Gregory Walcott, who plays Jeff Trent, who's the pilot in the movie, only did the movie as a favor to Wood. It's he did not want to be a part of it. He read the script and just like Vampira thought it sucked, but agreed to still do it. And the only reason he agreed is because him and Wood Jr. went to the same church.
Well, and remember, the two guys that were the gravediggers, who were the best actors on the whole thing,
were the roommates.
Were the roommates, and they also went to the church.
So it really was hey, I'm doing this movie as a favor for my friend, you two are gonna be in it, let's go to the set. So yeah, the movie started out just basically as a favor, but towards the end of production, once everything was said and done, it cost upwards of $60,000 to do, which equates to almost $500,000 in money today.
If they hadn't paid vampires so much, they probably could have done better special effects.
But the craziest part about this movie, and what really shows that it wasn't supposed to be the movie that it is Ed Wood Jr. had started filming with Bela Lugosi for a different film prior to shooting for Plan 9 from Outer Space. But Bela Lugosi ended up actually passing away during the filming of that other movie. So instead of just scrapping it all together, Ed Wood Jr. wrote the script based around the few scenes he had shot with Bela Lugosi. So the few scenes where we see his character walking through the woods, leaving the house, that was for a completely different movie. Once Bela Lugosi passed away, instead of scrapping everything he had, he wrote the script around what they had shot. Which is why whenever Bela Lugosi's character comes back to life as one of the zombies, his face is always covered because it's a different actor. And he always turns away from the camera. You never get a straight shot at this guy's face. And the reason he's also super crouched is because this guy was super tall and Bela Lugosi was a small man, old man. So they got this actor, they pretty much just got one of their friends who had the same color hair and was all right, throw this cape on. But that's another fun fact, is that was actually Bela Lugosi's Dracula cape. He
his own personal
brought
cape.
His own costume. Pretty much everyone brought their own costume.
Yeah, and Ed was very proud of the fact that this was his homage to Bela Lugosi because they were such good friends, and he felt that this was the best way that he could honor him.
Yeah, they were really good friends, so I think that's the reason he didn't want to scrap the film that they had done, especially considering the fact that it was probably some of the last film that Bela Lugosi had been a part of.
It was the last
Yeah,
film.
that was the last,
It literally was the last film that Bela Lugosi was a part of.
Yeah, so I understand why he wanted to still use it, but is that enough information to build a whole movie around? Fun fact, since I live in California and he's visiting me, we got to see the Walk of Fame in Hollywood, and we saw Bela Lugosi's star.
Because he's a huge star. It was shot originally in black and white.
Yes, and was...
It was colorized in 2005, and anyone who knows me knows that I'm not a fan of colorization. If it's a black and white film, I feel like it should stay a black and white film. Legend Films colorized it in 2005, and I think they did a phenomenal job. I've owned it in black and white. When we were reviewing for this video, I saw it in color for the first time, and I honestly think that the colorized version is a better watch than the black and white version.
It makes it make more sense because the black and white, just because the props are all very bad, it can get kind of hard to tell what's going on, because I've seen both versions and it's harder to tell what's going on in the black and white version.
One of my favorite scenes is when the first time that the UFO buzzes the pilot's house. We're going to reenact the first time that the UFO buzzes the house. In the black and white version, it's really it's awesome. I mean, it's the chairs fly, tables go everywhere.
It's the best special effects of the whole movie.
It's really, really good. I'm going to play Jeff Trent, who is the pilot, who is really, really, really frustrated because he saw those things and now he is being
basically told not to say anything.
This is my lovely wife, Paula, and we're sitting there and I'm mad because I'm frustrated because I'm not allowed to talk about what I saw in the plane, and I know that what I saw was a UFO, and then the UFO flies, buzzes over, and here we go. Ready? Ah!
The effects were cool. Getting the objects to move in that scene.
They moved the tables. They moved everything,
and you don't see strings. You don't see how they did it. The tables themselves look cool. But then it's they told all the actors to fling themselves in either direction.
And lay down.
And it's so you lose a little bit of the coolness because the acting isn't top tier. And the special effects were done by a guy named Charles Duncan, who was another guy who did it as a favor for Ed Wood Jr. And there aren't a ton of special effects. That is probably one of the best practical effects. But Inspector Clay's makeup is the best makeup of the film, and he's played by Tor Johnson, who is a professional wrestler. He turned out to be one of the better actors.
He was the biggest actor.
He was the biggest.
He was definitely the largest person on the stage.
His zombiness was the best zombiness because he looked the most like a zombie.
Was the best zombie. Yes.
Because Bela Lugosi's character, because it wasn't Bela Lugosi, just did the cape over the eyes, and then Vampira just walked around like this. And so Tor Johnson, his skin was not reacting well to the adhesive that Charles Duncan was using for like the scars on his face. So throughout the entire film, the scar just moves. Sometimes it switches to the other cheek.
You don't even notice.
And it's because he kept getting rashes in those places, so they couldn't keep putting the scar over the same place over and over again, so they just started moving it. But his makeup was the best makeup. He looked the most like a zombie.
Next to Bella, God rest his soul, he was definitely the biggest actor, the best actor.
I would say he's the best. I feel like Vampira's name is more recognizable.
I was talking about volume.
Volume, yeah.
Yeah, no, Vampira was...
She was the big name.
She was the big name. Bela Lugosi's character was called... What was his character's name?
The Old Man.
And what was Vampira's name?
The Old Man's Wife. Like, they're kind of... they're who we open up on. And it literally opens with, the Old Man's wife is dead. Here they are at her grave, burying her. We don't know how she dies, why she dies.
We don't even know who she is at that point.
We don't know who she is. Why is there such an age gap between the old man and his wife? Because Vampira and Bela Lugosi don't look in the same age group.
No.
And then Bela Lugosi's character walks out of his house. It's like a couple days after the funeral.
For the last time.
For the last time. And then he walks off screen. And now we're at his funeral. Their sole purpose in the movie is to have fresh dead bodies for the aliens to resurrect.
Exactly. We really don't know what happened. Don't know why she died. Don't know if he committed suicide or if he was just bad at judging lights.
Yeah, so but the whole
jaywalking kills.
The whole Plan 9 only works if they resurrect freshly dead bodies. Because the whole thing with Plan 9's plan is to resurrect the dead from the planet Earth and use the dead to basically take over Earth.
Because we build bigger bombs with bigger sticks and we don't know how to control it.
Yeah, so the aliens, we find out in the last, 20 minutes of the movie that the whole reason the aliens are taking over Earth is because they think we are too reckless with our technology, and after we created the atom bomb, we're basically releasing...
We're too immature to know
how dangerous the things that we're inventing are. So they're trying to stop the humans from basically blowing up the galaxy.
The reason that we're on Plan 9 is because the first 8 plans didn't work.
Yeah, and they skim over that part where they're just like, which plan are we on now? Plan 9.
They do say that the human consciousness is too hard to control, so now we're on Plan 9. And also, fun fact, the space commander who's in charge on the mothership has a big giant crest of medieval... Yeah, it was a medieval crest that you would expect to see.
This futuristic alien has a medieval times crest on his chest.
And he obviously knew the script because he was like, so, what are we looking at now? Is this Plan 9? Please tell me about it.
And you see it as well in the pilot's pit. Not the main pilot, Jeff, but the one next to him.
His co-pilot
doesn't know his lines either, so he has his script and just a pen to make it look like he's taking pilot notes. I don't know what pilot notes would be. But he's writing, he would read it and then say his line and then go back to act like he was writing. So they didn't even bother to learn their lines in this movie.
Well, they shot it in 2 weeks, and he hadn't finished it before they shot it, so...
Yeah, that is true. He didn't even finish the script before they started shooting. So he was like, let's just try this. That's why there's no dialogue in the movie.
He couldn't write fast enough.
Yeah, but, and some fun things about, we've learned from just watching the black and white to the colorized, and there are certain things that when they colorized it, they tried to make it, better. Because in the black and white version, there's a few parts where you can see, whenever the pilots see the spaceship in the plane, a big flash of light hits, and you can see one of the boom mic's shadows. But in the colorized version, they took that out.
But there is one scene where you can actually see the boom mic.
Yeah, in the scene when they're in the military office talking about the spaceship, you can see the boom mic in the center of the frame, just dangling there for a little bit. So they couldn't take out everything, but they did add some stuff with the colorized version. Like one of the gravestones, they actually added a name onto, which wasn't in there in the black and white version.
Yeah, and in the scene where Paula first comes across Bela Lugosi, apparently they replaced the photos in the pictures with updated photos of people. The original black and white pictures aren't the same as the colorized pictures.
But I think the reason that Ed Wood Jr. went in the direction he did with the script is because the movie The Day the Earth Stood Still, which came out in 1951, was a really big movie at the time, and that really sparked the whole government's hiding aliens from us kind of like fad. So I think he was just trying to kind of, it was popular at the time, so I'm going to go with that, which is why the aliens, but I think that's also why it takes until the last 20 minutes of the movie for the aliens to tell you what their actual plan was, because it took up until the last day of shooting for him to be like, this is what the movie's about.
He probably just saw the movie. He probably went to the movie theater and was like, damn, that's a good idea.
So it's the whole leading up till they tell you why they came to Earth, it's very much, we don't know what's going on in this movie, and it feels like he came up with the idea last minute and was like, here's your final like monologue, tell us why we're here, the end of the movie.
Also, fun fact, as you alluded to earlier, it was sponsored by the Baptist Church. Mm-hmm. The original title for it was Grave Robbers from Outer Space, but they felt that was too sacrilegious.
Yeah, the church told them, if you're going to name it Grave Robbers from Outer Space, we're backing out of the project to want our money back because it goes against what the church believed. And the movie did go into theaters as Grave Robbers from Outer Space in the Carlton Theater in LA, and then the church saw that's what they were calling it and was like, we can't call it like this. So it was pulled, the name was changed, and then it immediately just went into VHS release. Like
their version of VHS, 8mm.
Yeah, it was in theaters for a very short time. They had to pull it because the name needed to be changed, and it just never went back up into theaters. No. So I'm not sure when Ed Wood Jr. came up with the title for the movie, but I'm feeling like
probably on Thursday because it was released on Friday.
I'm going to say it probably wasn't before he got the donations from the church. If the church told him afterwards that if you call it Grave Robbers from Outer Space, we're backing out. So I feel like he was trying to...
He's sitting there going, what am I going to call it? And he's watching the film clips, and he sees, so we're on Plan 9, right?
Yeah. So I don't know if that was added into the script to accommodate for the title, or if it was already written and he was like, I already said that, it doesn't really specify where he got Plan 9 or what came first, what was in the script or the title of the movie.
I feel like as good a writer as he was, he wrote Plan 9 before he
solidified the name.
Yes.
Yeah, so it was supposed to be Grave Robbers from Outer Space, because that's really what the aliens do. They go to freshly buried bodies and resurrect them from the dead. The church was like, boy, we don't like that, so he changed it to Plan 9 from Outer Space, which is just the perfect title for a shitty horror movie, because there's nothing terrifying about Plan 9.
Now, why does this qualify as a horror movie?
Because there's aliens and zombies, and they got 2 high-caliber horror actors in it.
They did have a couple of horror actors in it. There was at least one good zombie.
I think it was originally classified as a thriller. I don't think it was originally...
Maybe a sci-fi.
Sci-fi. I think it was supposed to be like a sci-fi thriller. There's no blood. There's no, you don't see any stabbing.
You don't actually see any killing.
People were more easily frightened in the 50s.
So it was more of a suspense thriller kind of thing.
Yeah. But you can tell that the people who were part of the movie didn't give a shit about the movie that they were in. Because one of the detectives, while we were watching it, we made a comment. One of the detectives has his little gun and is pointing it at every single actor. He scratches his head with it, and it's just like, I'll go over here, you go over there.
He had his hand on the trigger. It wasn't just pointing the gun. He had his hand on the trigger.
And the whole time we were watching it, we were like, oh my god, this guy doesn't know how to hold a gun. And then we were reading about the movie later, and he was doing it on purpose to see if Ed Wood Jr. would notice or care, and he didn't.
The fun fact, the spaceships that they used
were actual toy spaceships.
They were toy spaceships. There was a lot of rumor about what he used to make the spaceships.
Yeah, people thought that they were
like cigar
boxes,
which
pieces
is stupid
of cardboard. But they are. He went to a toy store and bought toy spaceships. But the reason that the alien spaceship that Arrow Santana land in is like squared, because all we see is like the squared corner of it, and the reason for that is because that's the best that they could get for like a building. So the toy spaceship that they have that's supposed to be the one that lands on Earth, they took cardboard and made a box on the bottom of it to mimic the one that lands, because they couldn't afford to do a rounded spaceship exterior. It was too expensive to get rounded walls, so they just did the regular like corner and then just fiddled with one of the toys to make it match.
And you totally can't see the strings.
Oh yeah.
There are no strings on any of the spaceships. They are traveling at such a high rate of speed, light speed I believe it's what it's called, that it's kind of like a comet, and you see a trail of light behind it.
Totally not fishing line.
Totally not fishing line.
And you totally also don't notice the fact that half the backdrops are cloth and are wrinkled. And
not all of them.
Apparently,
only half of them.
One of them was a shower curtain that was used in 3 different scenes and just flipped, like reversed. I think it was used as like the door for the spaceship. It was used in the airplane. And the airplane is like the pilot to block off the pilot's thing. And it was used somewhere else. But that's just a shower curtain that Ed Wood Jr. had. And then the one backdrop, when it's nighttime and they're getting into the cop car, that backdrop is a black backdrop that you can see the wrinkles on the bottom of it.
Well, and remember when the colonel is calling the airstrike?
And the backdrop behind him is
wrinkled? The backdrop
wrinkled.
behind him is just wrinkled.
They didn't even bother to iron out their backdrop. So some fun things to look for in this movie, because it is dubbed the worst movie ever made. So there are tons of like just little things that happen that are just funny. One thing I noticed in the rewatch was whenever the pilots are up in their cockpit, Pilot Kent moves his hand and you can see the paint from his pilot steering wheel is coming off on his fingers. And then whenever the spaceship like rocks the plane, he grabs it to like, I guess, brace himself, but just pulls it over with him. And I'm like, I don't think that their steering wheels are supposed to just lift up and move like that.
And I don't know about you, but I think those steering wheels are totally a paper plate cut in half, spray painted.
It looks like a paper
taped
plate
onto a piece of cardboard.
Spray painted, yeah.
One of my favorite things is the seamless editing, much like on these videos, where it's this angle and it's daylight, and now we're going this angle and it's night.
But yet during one of the scenes, they're in the spaceship talking to the aliens, and the aliens ended up getting a hold of Paula, Kent's wife, and so they're like, look out there, we have your wife. And he looks out there and it's like pitch black, but the window he's looking through is just a like sky backdrop.
Yeah, there's like cloud. There's
blue
like
sky and clouds, and he looks out the window and it shows the zombie holding his wife, and it's dark outside, and then it cuts back to them inside the spaceship, and the backdrop is still just blue sky with clouds.
When they go through the graveyards, there's the scenes with Bela Lugosi, classic scenes. He comes out of the trees. It's a nice big open graveyard. When the actors are actually in the graveyard acting, you can see all the trees are like this tall, and every time they come by them, the trees just fall over. And at one
graves
point,
are like knocking over.
At one point, Vampire is coming through, and she hits the tree and it almost falls over.
So she's like,
so she stops
and
does this number.
And like they walk through the graveyard and their like coattails brush against the styrofoam graves, and they like rock back and forth. So the props in the graveyard are.
We went to
Halloween store props.
Yeah, we went to Spirit Halloween and got some styrofoam, but they didn't have any names on it. We got styrofoam tombstones, but we didn't like the names on them, so we turned them around backwards.
So none of the graves are marked, except for the one that they marked in the colorized version.
Only in the colorized version. So if you're watching this movie to be frightened out of your mind,
if bad acting and terrible props frighten you,
this is the movie.
This is the movie.
If you're watching this movie to be thoroughly entertained with a thriller, horror, suspense movie, this is the movie for you.
I don't know when it became dubbed as the worst movie ever made.
Right after it was made.
Early as the 90s, Seinfeld even references it because they put Plan 9 from Outer Space in theaters as like a special come watch the worst movie ever made. So TV shows in the 90s were already making fun of this, and it was already dubbed the worst movie ever made.
We're into like the 60th
60 years of...
Yeah, it's over 60 years old, and the youth are still talking about what a wonderful cinematic movie this is.
It's probably what birthed cult classics, because it's one of those movies that you don't watch to consume the content and be scared of what the movie is. Because I was reading that it was one of those movies that the people who watched it loved it because of how ridiculous it was, and it was one of the first ones to be dubbed like a cult classic of the people who think it's funny, who respect the actors that were in it, and, you know, people like me who enjoy the behind the scenes instead of watching the movie for what it is, but watching it for how it was made. And that's what birthed the cult classic aspect, and this movie was one of the first considered cult classics.
And I feel like if you are a true horror fan, you cannot not have this in your portfolio.
To quote Jerry Seinfeld, it's not Plan 1 through 8, it's Plan 9, the one that worked, the worst movie ever made. But yeah, it's definitely considered a cult classic. I definitely recommend watching it. Colorized or black and white, both are good. But you're gonna see different things with both of them.
And like I said, I own the black and white version. I've watched it 100 or 100 times. I thoroughly enjoyed watching the colorized version. I thought they did an excellent job colorizing it. Props to them.
And as far as the gore rating goes, I'm not even gonna bother with this movie because the worst that we get is the cut on the inspector's cheek as a zombie, which moved around his face, so...
I have my own ratings for horror movies, having grown up in the 80s, and everybody knows that if you have a movie in the 80s that's a slasher thriller, what's it gotta have?
Boobs.
Boobs.
But this movie, being from the 50s, boobage wasn't as okay, so instead of human boobage...
we turn to these spaceships.
The mothership is, we call it the tit ship. But it's basically a giant boob.
So that causes it with the killing of the inspector. I believe that makes it a real live horror movie.
And it's got
boobs and death.
It's got boobs and death. What more do you need?
What more do you need?
Instead of a gore rating, which we usually do gorgeous if it's got a lot of good gore, or gore-tesque if there isn't a lot, but this movie, being from the 50s and not being super gory, just as like a sci-fi movie, I'm gonna kind of nix the gore rating on this one, but instead we're gonna go with the boob rating, which the two scales are...
tits up or tits down.
While we didn't get any human tittage, because this wasn't an 80s movie with a slumber party or babysitting, we did get the giant tit ship, so we'll give it a tits up.
One tit up?
One tit up. But as I said, if you haven't seen this movie, you definitely should, especially if you're a big horror movie fan. This is, like I said, the start of cult classics, and it's considered the worst movie ever made, but arguably one of the best movies ever made because it's surpassed 60 years and people are still watching it and talking about it. It shows up on my Instagram feed. Yeah, it's still relevant. It's still a funny movie to watch and like hang out with friends and just laugh at all the acting and...
So if you have a friend who's not really into horror, but you want to watch a horror movie,
it's a good...
Hey, I've got a Plan 9.
Not 1 through 8. The one that worked.
The one that worked.
If you guys haven't watched this movie, I definitely recommend it. Colorized or not, it's a great film. If you have watched it, let me know what you guys think. You can either leave a comment down below or head over to my Instagram, What a Horror. I'll be making a post about this video as well. But thank you to my lovely father for starring in this video. As I said earlier, he was the start of my horror movie journey. He was one that showed me The Evil Dead when I was little. So it was inevitable for us to do a video together.
Thank you for having me, and Mom's still mad.
Mom's still mad about us watching Evil Dead. In fairness, it hit a point where I was the one like, Mom's going to the grocery store. Do we have enough time to watch Evil Dead? And shout out to one of my fans, Katura, for making me my first fan art of Freddy Krueger, which, as you guys know from one of my previous videos, is my favorite horror movie bad guy. So thank you to her. But I hope you guys liked this video. Please like and subscribe if you want to see more. I put out new videos every Friday. And until next time, stay spooky. It was stock footage.
I know.
Then why are you lying?
Because.
I'm not using that. I'm the one editing this. I'm cutting that shit out. Don't get him
However,
started on Miracle on 34th Street.
Favorite Christmas movie ever? I don't want to see it in color.
I don't want to see it at all. Because it was just one ship.
It was just one ship.
One tit.
It was just one ship. She don't know nothing.
But until next time, stay spooky.
Stay spooky. Yeah, see, sorry.